3 summers ago, I mixed up a batch of liquid that cost me about $2, poured it along the cracks in my driveway, and within 4 days, every weed was brown to the root. Not wilted, dead. My neighbour was out there the same week with a $60 bottle of name brand spray, and he was back at it by August. I tested mine in the same spot for 2 seasons before I trusted it. The herbicide industry has spent 80 years convincing us weed control has to come in a branded jug. It does not. Stay with me to the end because there is one ingredient I add to that $2 mix that nobody mentions, and without it, you're only burning the leaves, not killing the plant. Let me tell you how a method this simple got buried because the story matters. The villain here is not vague. It is the post-war synthetic herbicide industry, and it has a birthday. In 1945, a compound called 2,4-D went on sale to the home consumer for the first time under a brand name you can still find in old catalogues. Whedon, sold by the American Chemical Paint Company. That was not an accident of timing. The country had spent 4 years building enormous chemical manufacturing capacity for the war. When the war ended, that capacity needed a market, and the American lawn and garden became it. The same plants that made wartime chemicals pivoted to selling weed killer in a jug. Here's the part I had to dig for. Before 1945, if you pulled up a USDA bulletin or walked into a county extension office and asked how to handle weeds in your driveway or your gravel path, they told you to reach for vinegar, salt, or a kettle of boiling water. That was the standard advice. It was printed, it was official, and it cost almost nothing. Then the branded jugs arrived, and within a generation, that advice quietly disappeared from the columns. Now look at what that cost you. The average homeowner today buys a branded bottle for $60 or more and then sprays again and again 3 or 4 times a season because a contact-only spray burns the top and never touches the root. So you pay again. You breathe it again. Meanwhile, the pantry method that did the same job for about $2 sat on the shelf, forgotten. I am not telling you this as a man chasing a conspiracy. I am telling you as someone who went and read the old recommendations, then tested them in my own yard. The records are public. The chemistry is real, and the displaced method works. So let me walk you through exactly what is in that $2 batch, layer by layer, because the magic is not magic. It is chemistry, and I tested every piece of it. Start with what it actually is, because it is almost insultingly simple. 1 gallon of plain household white vinegar, the 5% acetic acid kind, the same jug you buy for cleaning, $2 to $3 at any grocery store. Into that gallon, I stir about 1 cup of ordinary table salt, sodium chloride, the stuff in your shaker, that is the base, vinegar and salt, that is the whole foundation, and it is the part the branded jug replaced. There is a third ingredient I add, and it is the one that nobody mentions, but I'm holding that until the end because it deserves its own moment. For now, vinegar and salt. This is precisely the kind of recipe that vanished from the advice columns the moment there was a patented product to sell instead. Now, here is the science, because I do not want you spraying something on your driveway without understanding why it works. Acetic acid is what we call a contact desiccant. What I mean by that is it dries the plant out by destroying the structure that holds water inside the cells. Every leaf is built from cells, and every cell is wrapped in a thin membrane made largely of lipids. Fats, essentially. Acetic acid disrupts those lipid membranes. Once the membrane fails, the cell cannot hold its water. The plant loses what we call turgor. That is just the internal water pressure that keeps a leaf stiff and upright. Strip that away and the leaf goes limp, then brown, and it happens fast. On a hot afternoon, you can watch a young weed start to wilt within the hour. By evening, it looks scorched. That is the acetic acid doing exactly what it does. And this is the kind of plain mechanism the standard advice stopped explaining, because once a problem looks simple, it is hard to sell you a $60 solution for it. But acetic acid alone has a weakness, and this is where the salt earns its place, and where the real power of this mix shows up. Vinegar by itself burns the top growth, and then it is gone. It breaks down. The weed re-sprouts from the crown. That is the base of the plant, right at the soil line where the growing point sits. The salt is what changes the outcome. Salt does 2 things. First, it pulls water out of the plant tissue through plain osmosis. Water always moves toward the higher salt concentration, so it drags moisture right out of the cells, doubling down on the drying. Second, and this is the important one, salt persists in the soil. It does not break down the way the vinegar does, down in the cracks of a driveway, in the gravel of a path. That salt lingers in the little pocket of soil under the weed and keeps the crown from pushing new growth. The vinegar kills what is showing. The salt makes sure nothing comes back. That combination is what takes a young annual weed dead to root in about 4 days instead of just wilting it for a week. I am not estimating that number. I ran this for 2 full seasons on the gravel walkway beside my beds and I wrote it all down. The same notebook habit I have kept for 22 years. One application along that walkway and it stayed clean for 14 months before I saw a single new sprout. 14 months, one treatment, about $2 of materials. My neighbour, not Carol, a different neighbour down the road, was out the same week I was, with a $60 bottle of name brand spray, hitting his own cracks. His top growth browned right up, looked great for a few weeks. By August, he was back out there spraying again because the contact spray never persisted in the cracks the way the salt did. Same summer, same weeds. One of us was done for over a year. This is the durability the branded jug quietly cannot match in hardscape. And it is exactly the use case that got written out of the advice. Now, I have to be honest with you, because that salt persistence is the whole reason this works, and also the whole reason you have to respect it. This mix is for hardscapes only. I mean driveways, gravel, paths, the cracks in your walkway, the seams of your patio, places where you never intend to grow anything. The salt that keeps your driveway clean for 14 months will do the exact same thing to a vegetable bed. It will sit in that soil and stop your plants from taking up water, and you do not want that anywhere near your tomatoes. So I will say it plainly. Never put this on a planted bed. Never near the roots of something you care about. Hardscapes only. I would rather lose you as a viewer than have you salt a bed you spent years building. That honesty, by the way, is the part the marketing never gives you in either direction. The old method had a real limit, and the new jug had a real cost, and nobody walking you down the store aisle wanted to slow down and explain either one. There is one more layer, and this is the part that separates people who try this once and give up from people who get the 14-month result. The conditions matter as much as the recipe. I tested this in different weather, and the difference was dramatic. You want to apply this midday in full sun on the hottest day you can get. Heat accelerates the desiccation. The same acid on the same weed will work 2 or 3 times faster at 90 degrees in direct sun than it will on a cool, overcast morning because you are stacking the sun's drying power on top of the chemistry. And you want a clear forecast. No rain for at least 48 hours after you spray because rain washes the acid off the leaf and dilutes the salt out of the cracks before either one finishes the job. I learned that the hard way the first season, sprayed before an afternoon storm rolled in, and got almost nothing for my trouble. Tested it again on a dry, blazing afternoon, and the difference was night and day. One honest caveat on strength, because I want you to succeed and not blame the method. Your standard 5% household vinegar handles young annual weeds beautifully. The soft, leafy stuff that comes up in spring and summer. The tough old perennials, the ones with deep woody taproots, will shrug off 5% vinegar and re-sprout because vinegar is a contact killer and it never reaches that deep root. For those, there is a horticultural grade vinegar that runs around 20% acetic acid and it hits a lot harder. I will tell you straight, 20% vinegar is strong enough to burn your skin and your eyes. So if you go that route, you wear gloves, you wear eye protection, and you treat it with respect. It is not the same casual jug as your kitchen vinegar. For most of what most of you are fighting in a driveway, the 5% does the job. This whole graduated approach, the right strength for the right weed, the right day for the right result, is exactly the kind of practical detail that used to live in those extension bulletins and got flattened into one word, spray, the moment the branded products took over the shelf. So that is the method, almost all of it. Vinegar to break the cells, salt to pull the water, and persist in the cracks. The right day, the right sun, the right forecast. $2 and a result that outlasted my neighbour's $60 bottle. by more than a year on the same week of the same summer. And I still have not given you the one ingredient that decides whether any of this kills the plant or merely scorches it. That comes at the end, and I promise it is worth the wait. Now, before we keep going, I want to share something with you. That caveat I just gave you. The reason salt is fine in a driveway crack and a disaster in a planted bed, that is not a folk rule. That is soil chemistry. And it is exactly what I walk through in Chapter 3 of my book, Steve's 30-Day Maximum Yield Protocol. It is called Soil Reset, and it covers how sodium and pH change what your soil can actually hold and release, with diagrams showing nutrient availability at each pH level. If you are past the stage of just hoping something grows and you want to stop guessing and start measuring, it is $17 at stevesgardenbooks.com. If you're watching on your television, grab your phone and point it at the QR code on screen. Take your time finding it. I will be right here. And if you're on your phone or laptop, the link is right down in the description. All right, let us keep going. So why did a $2 pantry mix get buried under a $60 jug? The answer is not mysterious. It is economic and it is simple. Vinegar and salt cannot be patented. You cannot own table salt. You cannot trademark acetic acid. There is no recurring revenue in telling a homeowner to walk to their kitchen. But a synthetic molecule is a different story. 2,4-D was patented and branded in 1945. Glyphosate followed, sold as Roundup starting in 1974. Both of those could be owned, named, and sold in a jug that runs empty and sends you back to the store. That is a business model. The pantry method is not. Layer in the culture of the 1950s, the new suburbs, the obsession with a flawless lawn, the idea that a real homeowner solved problems with a product off a shelf, and the branded jug became the default. The extension recommendations drifted to follow the products, not the other way around. A multi-billion-dollar consumer market grew up around weed control, and the old advice quietly fell out of the bulletins. Now, let me be honest with you, because I want to be. Vinegar is a contact killer, not a systemic one. It will not reliably take out a deep perennial taproot the way glyphosate does. A dandelion with a foot of root in good soil will laugh at 5% vinegar and push right back up. And salt harms soil. That is a real concession, not a footnote. I will not pretend otherwise. But here is the reframe. Where do most homeowners actually fight weeds? The cracks in the driveway, the gravel walkway, the seams in a patio, the edge of a path. That is hardscape. And that is precisely where salt persistence is an advantage instead of a liability, and precisely where a deep taproot is not the problem. For that use case, the most common one there is, the $2 mix wins outright. And that is exactly the use case the industry replaced. So every season you spent buying the branded jug and respraying that same driveway in August, you were paying over and over for a problem the pantry solved before 1945. Which brings me to the ingredient I have been holding back. 1 tablespoon of plain liquid dish soap per gallon of the vinegar and salt mix. That is it. And here is the science behind why it matters more than anything else in the jug. A weed leaf is covered in a waxy layer called the cuticle. Think of it as the plant's raincoat. When you spray plain vinegar onto that waxy surface, surface tension makes the liquid bead up and roll right off. The same way water beads on a freshly waxed car. The acid never truly contacts the tissue. You scorch the surface, the top browns, and the plant pushes new growth right back out of the crown a week later. The dish soap is a surfactant. What that means is it breaks the surface tension. The liquid stops beading and flattens out, wetting the entire leaf, and now the acetic acid sits in full contact and penetrates that waxy cuticle down to the growing point. That is the difference between burning a leaf and killing a plant. I did not take this on faith. I ran a row with soap against a row without soap. Same weeds, same gravel, same day, same hour. The no soap row browned on top and came right back within 10 days. The with soap row went brown to the root and stayed dead. Same acid, same salt, same sun. 1 tablespoon of soap was the only variable, and it decided the entire outcome. And that cheap, unpatentable little detail is exactly the part that never survived into the branded jug era. All right, before I let you go, The reason I trust that $2 mix is not that somebody told me it works. It is that I tested it for 2 seasons on the same walkway, ran my soap versus no soap rows, and wrote every result down in the notebook. That record keeping discipline is the whole foundation of the book. It is chapter 2, the measurement foundation, and it lays out the exact system I use to turn guesswork into something repeatable across the whole garden. The same approach behind my 22 years of recorded data. Now you have the method. If you want the full measured system, it is $17 at stevesgardenbooks.com. If you're on the television, go ahead and scan that QR code on the screen. Pull your phone out of your pocket and take your time, no rush. And if you're watching on a phone or laptop right now, the link is sitting in the description. So that is the whole thing. A gallon of white vinegar, about a cup of salt, and 1 tablespoon of dish soap, roughly $2, and it kills weeds, brown to the root on driveways, gravel and cracks, with no branded jug required. Now you know the method the industry replaced after 1945, and it costs about the price of a cup of coffee. Just remember my honest qualifier. This is for hardscapes only. Your conditions may differ, and you should test it in one small spot before you trust it across the whole path. Next time, I will show you another overlooked $2 pantry trick, a simple boric acid barrier that stops ants from farming aphids up onto your pepper plants. All right, that's what I have for you today. I'll see you in the next one.